Happy Thursday. Here is the question of the day, and you can go ahead and pause it and try to answer it, and unpause, and I will talk about it. The way that you have two healthy parents that have a kid with cystic fibrosis is cystic fibrosis is a mutation on chromosome 7, and it's a recessive disease, which means that if you have one good chromosome and one bad chromosome, so one mutated version and one positive version, um, or normal version, then you don't have cystic fibrosis. So you can have two healthy parents that each have one bad copy and one good copy, and they can both give their bad copy to their offspring, and that kid will end up with cystic fibrosis. We'll talk about that on a future slide. So, next slide, hereditary disorders. I gave this handout in class about how to about a whole bunch of the different disorders that happen on various chromosomes. Some of those are achondroplasia, ALS, Huntington's disease, Tay-Sachs, Alzheimer's, sickle cell anemia. And what I really wanted to emphasize is that all of these disorders are different in that you inherit them from your parents. Your parents have it on their genes and they give it to you, rather than a chromosomal disorder like Down syndrome from yesterday, where you don't actually get it from because your parents have it, you get it because of a mistake during meiosis. Okay, so back to cystic fibrosis. These CFTR channels, these protein pumps, what they're supposed to do in your body, this is your cell membrane, this green thing, and they're supposed to pump chloride ions from inside your cell to outside your cell. And when they don't do that, because you get a mutated version, you get a frame shift mutation. Remember, that's when one of the base pairs is deleted or inserted into the DNA sequence and it shifts everything so it's wrong. You get a weirdly shaped protein and it doesn't work right. So the chloride ions can't get pumped out of there. You get this mucus building up on the outside of these cells, and particularly this happens in your alveoli, in your lung cells. And you build up this fluid, this mucus in your airways, and eventually you're not able to effectively exchange oxygen. So essentially, people with cystic fibrosis typically die in their teens or their 20s, sometimes their 30s, from a buildup of fluid in their lungs from suffocation. Um, I'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. I had a friend in college whose sister died at age 22, Anna. She died at age 22 she had cystic fibrosis, and she got some treatment to help with it, but ultimately her lungs couldn't keep up. So this goes back to that question of the day. You can have a carrier father and a carrier mother, which means they have one bad version and one good version. Yellow is the bad, the gray is the good. And they could each give their bad version to their offspring, in which case they will end up with cystic fibrosis. Or there's a 50-50 chance that the kid ends up with either an affected version and an unaffected version, which means that those kids will now be carriers. And then the final possibility is that both of the good versions of the gene get passed on to the child and they will be completely unaffected. So let's show how to do it with Punnett squares. Oops, I forgot to delete these guys here from it. So what you do with a Punnett square is you write big F, that's capital F, and then write another one, lowercase f. What that represents is the healthy dominant gene trait, and then the lowercase represents the recessive trait, or represents the person who maybe has that mutation. Wait to see kind of what I'm doing with this, where I'm going with this. So, and then the other individual is reproducing with big F and little f. Okay, and there we go. So, when these two carriers reproduce, they have a good version and a bad version. Good version, bad version. That means there's a 50-50 chance, 50-50 chance that the kids end up with big F, little f. So big F, little f, or big F, little f. There's a 25% chance, oops, why does it keep doing this? There's a 25% chance that that child would end up with big F, and then there's a 25% chance the kid ends up with little f, little f. What these mean The big F once again refers to the good gene. The little f refers to the bad gene, the mutated gene. And there's a 25% chance that the kid ends up with two versions of the good gene, a 25% two versions of the bad gene, and a 50% chance of one good, one bad. So in terms of what are the chances of the offspring ending up with cystic fibrosis, if both parents are carriers, that answer is 25%. So that would be this kid right here. There's a 75% chance that they don't have cystic fibrosis. So that's 25 plus 25 plus 25. Okay, and then achondroplasia. This happens when you get a mutation in a gene called FGFR3, the fibroblast growth receptor protein. Kind of like the cystic fibrosis, this just sits in the cell membrane, and what it's supposed to do is receive a message from outside the cell, and then it sends a signal inside the cell. And specifically what that signal is it's supposed to tell that cell to start converting cartilage into bone. But that can't happen correctly when this receptor is being built wrong in terms of the protein, in terms of the amino acid sequence because of a mutation. And so in individuals with achondroplasia, they don't build bone correctly in their arms and their legs and also in their skulls. So they've got sometimes some oddly shaped skulls. And that's actually a very similar mutation to what happens in mini dachshunds and corgis and all those animals that were actually selectively bred for the mutation. And then once they got that mutation, they kept on breeding animals with the mutation for that purpose. The reason I wanted to talk about this is achondroplasia is an example of an autosomal dominant disorder, which means dominant, you only need one copy for it to express itself in the individual. So about 80% of the time in America, when somebody's born with achondroplasia, it's not actually because their parents gave it to them in terms of, look at these two parents. Neither one of these parents has the bad version of the gene. It's because in that meiotic process, in the formation of the egg and the sperm, there was a brand new mutation that happened in that chromosome. And so that kid with just one bad version is going to end up with achondroplasia. The other 20% of the births in the US are because they inherit it from a parent. So let's say this kid goes on to have kids. He's got one bad, one good. His kids will have a 50% chance of receiving his mutated gene, his bad chromosome. So 50% of his kids would have the achondroplasia mutation. This is just a quick diagram. I don't know if you can see it very well in the video. This is what would happen if you have two different individuals with achondroplasia, so two individuals with dwarfism who mated. And so notice they've got big D, little d, big D, little d. That's because they've got one healthy and one unhealthy chromosome, or one good version, one bad version. 25% chance that the kid would be totally unaffected, so they would get the two good versions, the two little d's, and then a 50% chance that they would end up with one of each, so those kids would be dwarfs, they would have achondroplasia. And then if you get both bad versions, those individuals do not survive. They would basically be a miscarriage, and they would not be able to be born because their bodies aren't making any of that correct protein to help make their bones. Okay, a couple terms before we do a little bit more practice with the Punnett squares. Genes. Genes just refer to these little chunks on the chromosome, little chunks of DNA. So you have a chunk that refers to your height, and this is actually oversimplified. We know of at least 50 different genes that contribute to your height, and we think there's maybe over 200 that can contribute to it. Eye color as well. You've got a chunk of your DNA on a chromosome that contributes to eye color, and there's actually more than just one. And then the term allele. So an allele versus a gene, they're very similar things, and in some ways all alleles are just different versions of genes. So for example, on this chromosome, we've got the gene that causes the petal color of this flower. So the purple version is a purple allele. The white version is called a white allele. So allele just kind of means what version of that gene you've got. So if we go back to achondroplasia, all these individuals have one mutant allele and one normal allele. Okay, then homozygous versus heterozygous. So homo means same, hetero means different, and what this refers to is, you've got two sets of each chromosome, and if you've got a blue allele, or if we're talking about eye color, and you've got one of your chromosomes codes for blue eyes, the other one codes for brown eyes, we call that heterozygous. So you've got one of each, two different ones. If you've got two brown alleles, two brown eye genes, then we would say you are homozygous, and I would call this homozygous dominant because you've got two of the dominant trait. This individual is homozygous recessive, which means they've got two of the recessive trait. So once again, this just refers to if you have the same or different versions of a gene, of an allele. And then using these terms, dominant versus recessive and phenotype versus genotype. This individual right here, they've got brown hair. Well, they've also got brown hair, and so do they. So they've all got the same phenotype. They all have brown hair. However, this girl has red hair. So her phenotype is red hair. Their phenotype is brown hair. But they don't actually have the same genes, all these people with brown hair. This individual has two brown hair copies. This person's got one red hair, one brown hair. This person's also got one brown hair, one red hair. So they've got different genotypes, heterozygous genotypes. And then this girl has homozygous recessive. She's got two red hair genes. So that's genotype is what do you actually have in terms of your genes on your chromosome, and phenotype is what do you actually look like. Okay, so let's do a little bit more practice. You can try this on your own if you want to try to pause it and do each one of these problems. So Philip Lindsay and Emma Stone are going to have kids, and what color is their hair going to be? So you can put a big B up here, a little B here, a little B here, and a big B, up, oh gosh. Big B up here. Oh, sorry, I'm not very good at placing these. Here we go. So another big B. Hopefully you can see where that is. So now when we cross these, the first possibility is going to be big B, little b. Second possibility, big B, little b. Third possibility, big B, little b. And fourth possibility, big B, little b. So all four possibilities are big B, little b. So in terms of their kids, the probability is 100% that their kids will end up with black hair, not red hair. Now let's try earlobes. Maybe look at your friend's earlobes. Try to tell if they have attached versus detached earlobes. And what we're going to do is figure out. Okay, so I'm going to say that there's two individuals with both with big D, little d, so heterozygous. So big D, little d, and go over here. Big D, oops. Big D, big D, little d, and little d. So now these individuals are both heterozygous, and both of these would have detached earlobes. So you got two individuals who are going to mate with detached earlobes, and first possibility is big D. Second possibility, big D, little d. Third probability would be big D, little d, and the fourth one is little d. So notice 75% of the time, so these three chances, 75% of the time, those kids are going to end up with detached or free earlobes. And then 25% of the time, they're going to have offspring with attached earlobes. And I do want to make clear that this does not mean that if you have 4 kids, 3 of them are detached, 1 of them is attached. It just means every single time that you reproduce, it's a 75% chance of detached. For example, my wife has 3 sisters and 0 brothers. you'd think that on average, if my in-laws have 4 kids, that 2 out of the 4 would be boys and 2 out of the 4 would be girls. But that's not how reality works. They had a probability every time when they had kids that they'd have a 50% chance of girl, 50% chance of boy. But that doesn't mean that in a sample of 4 that you get 2 and 2, or in this case 3 and 1. It's just every single time, what are the chances? And then the last one, how often are these offspring of, God, who's this? Regina George from Mean Girls. This is Rachel McAdams, I believe, and Owen Wilson. She's big H, little h, so brown hair is big H, blonde hair is little h. She's got brown hair, and then he's little h, he's blonde hair. So what are the chances of their kids having blonde or brown hair? I'll let you pause it and try that without me, and then you can unpause, and I'll just go ahead and tell you that it should end up with 50% blonde and 50% brown, and that's because the final answer should look something like this. Actually, I'll go ahead and do this from the start. Sorry, it's just a pain in the butt with Google Slides here to type these in. So I'm putting Owen Wilson on the left side. You don't actually have to put him on the left side or the top. You can kind of pick what you want. So Rachel McAdams up here, big H, little h. Owen Wilson down here, little h. And their kids will be big H, little h, big H, little h, little h, and little h. So these two probabilities are blonde. These two are brown. So it's a 50-50 chance of the kids having brown versus blonde hair. Hope you guys have a good day, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.